Welcome to the Michigan Football at the Voice of College Football channel. I am one of the post-game hosts, Desmond. I am here with Mark Rogers. We are here every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for about an hour or so to chat with you, talking all things Michigan football. Also, while you're here, share the video out on social media and also visit Mark's main page, The Voice of College Football. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you see at the bottom our ticker there, you can join Mark's Patreon, where they have weekly picks from not only Mark himself, but other media members as well. And other than that, glad to have you. So, Mark, how we doing today?
Doing well, and doing well as long as nobody makes me get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and walk a dog and do my workout.
Yes. We were talking before the show behind the scenes about one of my New Year's resolutions was to be a little more consistent, waking up earlier. So we have a puppy that is about 7 months old. So if you ever see me duck off to the side like this, I'm probably yelling at her just to stop doing whatever she's doing. But I try my best to get up at 5 a.m. I take her for like an hour walk, and then I do my own little workout as well. So it is a bit self-serving because once we have that walk, it's about 2-3 miles in the morning. She sleeps for most of my work day. So it is a little self-serving. So I'm not gonna make it seem like I'm Mother Teresa or anything like that. But it definitely helps getting up in the morning and not having just kind of the rushed chaos in the mornings, which I'm sure anyone who works a full-time job can probably understand that madness, that chaos in the morning that I think we all do.
I made one New Year's resolution, and I don't even like to call it a New Year's resolution because I like to think that any day can be the start of something great. So if it's July 3rd or November 21st or whatever day of the year, you don't have to wait until that magical January 1st to start a nutritional program or to better yourself in whatever way that is. So for me, limiting sugar is what I've been working on since the start of the year. So
Okay.
I've had no ice cream, no donuts, no cookies. For me, that is a major accomplishment. And I am reading labels, and which I've done anyway, to limit the sugar. So it's not that I've gone without any sugar, but without any obvious sugar, no fast food, and included. And then the no pastries, donuts, cookies, ice cream that I so much love.
Now, have you felt any difference, like as far as your energy level, like anything like that? Have you felt any difference with with none of the obvious sugar?
So here's the thing with me, and I don't know if a lot of people are going to like me or hate me for making this statement, but I haven't had any issues. Like, I have eaten horribly my whole life, but the few things that I have done, and when I talk about horribly, I mean I can sit down with a full box package of Chips Ahoy and just dust them off, knock them all off.
That's impressive.
So I've not eaten well, but I drink a ton of water, and I exercise, and I've exercised my whole life. So there's a few things, and I think I've been blessed with decent genes that like. I haven't had something slap me in the face like, oh wow, I gained 40 pounds, or I feel horrible, or anything like that. But I know that it's coming. I know that I need to correct life habits. So I didn't have anything like that really pushed me. My son in particular, he's deterred from eating junk food, which he loves just as much as I do, because it upsets his stomach. So it bothers his stomach. So that's it. But for me, like, I can eat crazy combinations of food, nothing. I got a steel lined stomach and nothing bothers me. So I haven't had anything like that that's hit me. I just know it's not good.
That's the best time to make the change, though, is before you actually need to, because if you can do it just kind of on your own before it's like, hey, Mark, you know, before the doctor is telling you, hey, you got to cut this out, that's probably the best time to make the change and the edit. So That's a good thing. It's a good thing,
Yeah.
definitely.
I've spent my life telling doctors when they've said, well, everything checks out, everything's great, your cholesterol's this year. And I'm like, I don't know how that is, because they'll say, just keep doing what you're doing. And I'll be like, are you serious? Do you know what I eat? Do you know I knock down a couple bowls of ice cream like every night? Do you? And they're like, well, I don't know what to tell you, but everything checks out well.
Well, that as long as that's what the checkup says, that's the checkup is king. I mean, you
But again,
can't fool the
I know it's
numbers.
not
So
good. So we're
well,
limiting the sugar. So I also come with the philosophy that even though I feel good, who knows how much better I could feel?
that is
I
true.
don't know.
True. Yeah, that's very true. Very interesting. Because I think about that too. Even though I'm getting up earlier, I have to go to bed much earlier than I usually do. So I used to, I mean, obviously when I was 22, 23, I mean, I could go to bed at midnight, wake up at 6, 7 o'clock, be just fine, or even wake up earlier than that. And now I find myself 9:30, like I need to be in bed. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really rough morning. So, yeah, it's one of those things where early rise kind of by force gets you early to bed. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I think Rob J had mentioned something about Harbaugh and possibly staying and going. That was something I didn't know if it was going to be kind of Harbaugh fatigue for everybody. I know we talked about it last week, but wanted to. We'll see if you guys are interested in kind of hitting that topic. Definitely let us know in the chat. But first thing wanted to kind of talk about, which we also were talking about behind the scenes, was the transfer portal. And should the transfer portal change? I, for one, am a big believer in player mobility. I think the idea of the transfer portal is a good thing because circumstances change. There are some people that will say, well, you committed to the school, not the coach. Well, I can understand that line of thinking, but things change. I mean, that it's an easy thing for someone to say who's not enrolled at the school where my coach just left. Like that's a very easy thing for to say, but I think it is a good thing that players get a chance to go to a situation that is more advantageous for them. I think a great example of that would be a Jamison Williams, who was way down on the depth chart at Ohio State, went to Alabama, got a chance to play right away, had a really successful season, and is looking like, even despite his injury, is going to be a first-round draft pick. And had he stayed at Ohio State, not saying that wouldn't have happened, but I don't think that was going to happen this year the way it did. So there's definitely benefits to it, but what I don't think the NCAA thought would happen is what is actually happening with the transfer portal now, where it's just loaded with players who are essentially walking away from a at least partial scholarship, more than likely full scholarship at pick a school, Clemson or Ohio State, and trying to find a better spot or a better situation for themselves, but due to whatever it is, not having film or not enough stars, which is unfortunately something that plays into it. I'm not a 5-star kid, so I don't get the numerous phone calls that Spencer Rattler got, or I don't get the phone calls that maybe Jamison Williams got. So guys end up walking away from a scholarship opportunity, and I'm not quite sure even 50 to 60% of these guys are walking back into a scholarship. So, and we talked about it before the show, Mark, but it sounds kind of like old grumpy guy that I'm saying, like, this needs to change. But it really is for the benefit of these kids, because you already have the bird in hand. You've got the scholarship. Granted, the situation may not be great. You may be buried on the depth chart, so on and so forth. But I just see these players in mass exodus going to the transfer portal, and I'm just not sure they all are having landing spots to where they are also getting another scholarship. So that's kind of my take on it. What are your thoughts on the transfer portal, and do you think it should change in some form?
I believe that one of the precious aspects of college football, to separate it from the NFL for years and years and years, in addition to, or kind of to complement the tradition, the pageantry, the rivalries, everything that separates it from other sports, is the fact that there's no player movement, hasn't traditionally been player movement. And so you can think about your favorite players, and they were always, they didn't go to Michigan, Penn State, and Auburn. They typically played for one team. And we can all watch the NFL games over the weekend, and when they announce all the players, or they're announcing themselves, and they spit out their school, that we can take a sense of pride if we're a fan of whatever school, to say that's my guy, and he always played for us and always won these rivalry games and played in bowl games, and he's forever going to be a fill in the blank. Desmond Howard, always going to be a Wolverine, didn't play for anybody else. As opposed to, once they go to the NFL, there's very few players that make it through an entire substantial career and only play for one team. So that's always been something about college football that I thought was pretty amazing, that was special about it, is just the player loyalty and allegiance, and because the fans could stay attached to the players that way. On the other hand, I believe in a free market system. I believe in our way of life in this country, that you are free to choose where you live, where you work, where you get an education. And so why would that opportunity and that freedom not be extended to student athletes? And so that's only seems right, that they're able to move and choose a better opportunity, or what they deem to be a better opportunity. But with all freedoms, I think, come some level of responsibility, and come some wisdom to apply to the system. Just like if you're a capitalist and believe in free market system, that doesn't mean there are no laws and no restrictions, and everybody just does whatever they want and just let supply and demand dictate everything. Well, there are certain reasons why there are regulations and laws put into place to protect people, and to protect the consumer, to protect businesses, and so forth and so on. And I think the same thing applies here. I don't exactly know how that should apply, but based on the conversation that we had before we started to record, there's just a flood of athletes that see opportunity, and where the grass looks greener on the other side, therefore they're turning their back potentially on that scholarship and putting them in a position of jeopardy, of risk. And I think it's similar to what we saw 10 to 15 years ago in the NFL draft, before the NFL cooperated with college football to say, okay, we're going to provide a draft grade for everyone, so that prospective NFL player has a legitimate, valid document to see how they're being evaluated, and not listen to a bunch of people around them to say, yeah, you can be an NFL player, you're great, you're awesome, you just ran for 1,000 yards, you're this, you're that. And then they go and they get drafted in the 7th round, or they don't get drafted and they're disappointed. Well, now the NFL is able to provide a draft grade to say, you're a 3rd or 4th rounder, this is what you are. And then they can realistically make a decision. They can make an informed decision. It would be, at least in my thought right this second, difficult to do that in college football, but to at least, after this runs through a couple years, to be able to say, okay, this is what you're faced against. These are the number of players in the portal. This has been the percentage of them that have been able to sign at a similar school or any school, and just be able to give some information to educate players on the situation, and maybe even track these players, even the ones that are able to land at another school, and say, this player got this amount of playing time at their original school, and this is how it worked out for them, and they didn't get any more playing time, or they actually lessened their playing time, or just somebody to track this to be able to inform and educate future student athletes to the choice that they're making.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, and I wonder. I'm sure the data is out there. I don't know who's put it together, but I think it would be at least helpful. I mean, any data at all would be helpful for these young men. I mean, if it's hey, for every 100 guys that go into the portal, only 15 get a scholarship. I think that would be enough. And once again, I don't want to discourage these guys, but I want them to make an informed decision to where they can make a decision based off of the facts and the numbers that only 15% of guys coming out of the portal are getting a scholarship. And I have no idea what the numbers are, but just for sake of discussion, I think at least for a guy who would look at that number could say, okay, there's a 15% chance that I go into the portal and I get a scholarship. And then really take a look at himself saying, have I really done everything I can do to get on the field? Have I dedicated myself in the weight room? Have I gotten my nutrition together? Have I cut out the Chips Ahoy that Mark just cut out? Have I cut out all the ice cream? Have I gone to bed? Like, just taking care of myself to the point where I've literally done everything. Have I put in all the time in the film room and met with my position coach? So there's a lot that goes into it, but if we could at least give these guys something, and maybe it's just the figures, or maybe, and I know this is a touchy word, maybe we get some type of committee of, I don't know, up and coming coaches or retired coaches. I'm not exactly sure what it would look like, but at least some people that could analyze a player, their quote unquote value, maybe similar to the first round draft grade. And maybe your 5 and 4 star guys aren't going to need that service where they reach out to them, but maybe for the guy who's a 3-star, maybe high level 3-star, mid level 3-star, or 2-star, could reach out to this committee or get some data from this committee saying, hey, based on all of the information that you have on me, whether it's high school tape or rankings and college tape rankings, what do you see? And maybe that committee comes back and they say, listen, you're probably a G5 level starting receiver. I think that would be at least something for them to work off of. So if I know that 15% of guys that get into the portal get a scholarship, and then also that based on some level of coaches think that I'm probably a G5 starter, at least that's some information that they could use to make a decision. And when you're talking about 17, 18 to 22-year-old young men, there's still going to be some that make poor decisions based off of that. I mean, we all made poor decisions when we were in that age range. So maybe your ego is hurt to the point that you still think you should be starting, so I'm leaving anyway. And that's fine, but I think we need to, and I say we as a collective, we need to do more to help these student athletes make better decisions when it comes to the transfer portal. Because I think we just flipped it on and just let them do, and gave no real guidance on it.
You bring up Jameson Williams. He is the classic, the classic example of it working, because even Kenneth Walker was playing at Wake Forest. He didn't have an issue with playing. He just got in the transfer portal and went somewhere else, and it worked out great for him too. But he was already on the field for Wake Forest, so that was not an issue there. Jameson Williams, I can't imagine this happening very often. This is a very rare case where we're talking about a player who just declared for the NFL draft, and I haven't seen a draft grade on him, but he's going to be a first rounder, right?
I saw a mock draft today that had him 21, maybe. So I mean, he's going to be a first rounder.
So here's a first round NFL talent that could not get on the field for a significant time at Ohio State, and just with every position putting multiple players on the field other than quarterback, I do see where quarterback's different. I don't like to separate the positions usually and glorify the quarterback, but it's just a different situation because there's only one on the field. So typically, if you're not good enough as an offensive lineman to start at TCU, then unless you're looking to downgrade to a group of 5 school because you just want to play, then that's great. I understand that, but a lot of this movement, I'm not understanding. It's not making sense. If you can't play at TCU and you're an offensive lineman, you can't be in that rotation of 7, and then you transfer to Iowa State. Well, I'm not seeing where this really adds up for you. From a playing standpoint, there could be all sorts of other circumstances involved where it's just not a good fit culturally or geographically, and other things come into play as well. I do think that maybe the one-time transfer rule will start to vet some of this out. So on the surface, without anyone else intervening to override the rules because of hardships or anything else, these players are allowed to transfer once without penalty. And then there is a 1-year requirement to sit out after that. So I would think that would start to bring this down, plateau this number at least.
I mean, you would think so, but at the same time too, I'm not sure that it would. I really don't know. The tough part is I think people are treating Jamison Williams' situation as the rule and not the exception, and it's the opposite. He is the exception. He's not the rule. Most times it's some player that we haven't heard about, some guy who had a scholarship at LSU or Florida State or Alabama who jumps in the transfer portal and doesn't land anywhere. Like that's probably that I would say that's probably the rule, just based on the number of kids who are in the portal. And also, even for, let's say, a guy who was at Texas and I jump in the transfer portal, I'm in there for 2-3 weeks. I talk to a bunch of coaches, or maybe 5 coaches, and I'm like, you know what? It doesn't sound great. I don't know how that conversation in that situation goes with going back to Steve Sarkisian saying, hey, coach, I know I jumped in the transfer portal and we had a conversation and I said I was going to, leave and we had this combo, but I think I want to come back. I'm sure some coaches would welcome that player back, but I think some coaches would probably say, sorry, son, there was a kid at Utah who wanted to transfer, and we had a conversation with him. He's actually essentially taking your scholarship. We don't, unless you want to walk on and you're now going to pay for school here. Like, I really don't know how that conversation even happens for, a player who was in the portal and now wants to come back. There's just so many variables to it.
And maybe another condition that needs to be put in place that just hit me in the last 5 seconds, so I haven't vetted it out myself, is that there's some kind of limitation, and maybe there is. What interests me, before I get to my point, is that I see very educated and informed college football writers that on many levels know a lot more than I do, because they're writing books and they're beat writers, and they're dealing with these kind of issues all the time, and researching them and writing articles. And then I'll hear questions posed that they can't answer because I don't know that a lot of people know if there are rules, what the rules are. So, for example, there may be a rule for this, maybe there's not, but I'll suggest it, a limitation of how long you can be in the transfer portal. So if you go into the transfer portal, to your example that you just gave, you go into the transfer portal as a player. That coach, your previous coach, he's kind of held hostage as to, okay, you're exploring your options. You may come back. Caleb Williams, for example, right now is in the transfer portal, but he has stated, I may come back to Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. To your earlier point, he's in a position of power where he's good enough that everybody wants him, so he's okay. But in another case, does that player burn a bridge and is not able to come back? Or even if he is, that coach is they're constantly now having to run the the analysis on their roster to figure out how many players they have, what they need, and not just a total number at each position, and determine, okay, the head coach and the coaching staff can't be held hostage by players being in the transfer portal and them not knowing, are they going to want to come back? Are they not? And all that. We can't just sit tight and wait. We have to be aggressive, to your point, and go out there and fill those scholarship spots.
I just don't. It maybe a timing or a time frame is the solution to help all parties involved, because like I said, I'm all for a player who just feels like this isn't a great situation at whatever Michigan State, and I want to transfer to maybe Texas Tech. That we had a good conversation with the coaching staff there when I was getting recruited. Sounds like it still may be available there for me, but I wonder if it would be a more manageable situation if there was a time frame, maybe on the calendar year, where you could be in the portal, and from May and June, you players can be in the portal. After that, there maybe if you decide to transfer outside of that, you get the 1 year sit out or whatever the case may be. I'm not sure, but I just don't think it's working the way that the NCAA intended it to work.
I, like a lot of people, Des, immediately connected it to NFL free agency, saying, hey, this is like NFL free agency at the collegiate level. And then it only took me a few days or a few weeks of talking about it with people for it to hit me and say, yeah, it is on some levels, but no, this is the wild, wild west. This is going on 24/7, 365. No, the NFL free agency is not like that.
Mm-mm.
Any player in college football at any time can wake up and say, I'm going to enter the transfer portal. Well, in the NFL, I'm guessing roughly 90% of the players are under contract, can't declare for free agency. Roughly 10%, maybe it's 6%, whatever the number. A small percentage of players can enter free agency. And so that's number one. It's a limited number of players. Number two, it does have a time restriction. NFL free agency starts on a certain date. It ends on a certain date.
Mm-hmm.
And to Ed, to your point about Jamison Williams, Ed, he caught 9 passes the previous season at Ohio State. Yes, he saw the field, but he didn't see a lot of the field. 9 passes.
I think he might have caught more than that in a single game at Alabama. I mean, he was lights out.
Becoming the ultimate number one home run hitter. Didn't catch the most passes or anything like that, but in terms of being a home run threat in college football, he was the guy this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is similar to NFL free agency, but like you said, the same thing. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, and I have no idea what player it was, but if I'm not mistaken, there was a guy in the transfer portal. I think it was in the last 2 years. I mean, in like the second week of the season, where he's just like, well, no, I want to transfer and go somewhere else, and I need to look it up and see, but it just and even now with the redshirting rule, that comes into play for guys where they only want to play. If they're not going to be a full-time starter, well, let me play in 4 games and then essentially put me on ice so I don't have to burn a year eligibility, which to me, those things kind of coincide. Like it's a similar thing, but like you said with free agency, I mean, it's different. I mean, it is basically free agency now, but I just there's only so many teams, and when you hop in that portal, yeah, it's just you might get yourself humbled. That's I think the unfortunate reality for a lot of guys, and I would say the average college football athlete probably has a life-size ego, and that's understandable because I think you have to have that to be the type of player those guys are. But your ego and what you think of yourself may be very different than what the coaches who need to offer you a scholarship think about you.
That is a great point that you just made, and it reminds me of a conversation that I had with Richard Williams, who was the head coach at Mississippi State in basketball. So I had a conversation with him. This is back when I was covering the SEC and going to all the games and all that. So I'm at practice and I'm talking to Mississippi State head coach Richard Williams. They had just gone to the Final Four the year before, and he had 2 first-rounders that year, Eric Dampier and Dante Jones. So the next year, they're not nearly as good. He's got an average team, like a mid-level SEC team. And we're having a conversation. I forget how it came up, but he's the rest of the team's in the locker room, and he says to me, he goes, "Mark, how many players do you think in that locker room are going to go to the NBA?" And I'm like, I didn't want to say none because I didn't know where he was leading with this. And he goes, 0. He goes, none of them. But we just had 2 first-rounders last year, and they play with them, and they practice with them. So I said, and he said, almost all of them think they're going to play in the NBA. And he goes, I got 1 or 2 that might play in Europe somewhere, might get a paycheck for a few years in Europe. None of them are playing in the NBA, but they all think they're going to play in the NBA.
Mm-hmm. And that's legitimately it. And same thing for guys in college football is they all, especially incoming freshmen, before you really get a grasp of how college football operates and like I said, the work that has to go into it. I mean, being on the practice field is probably 10 to 15% of it. There's the nutrition, there's the film study, there's meeting with your coaches, there's knowing the playbook, understanding all of that. And then also, too, your practice habits. So for a lot of guys, they come into it thinking, well, this coach said X, Y, and Z while he was recruiting me. And, Coach coach may have said that, but he was also trying to get you to enroll in school there and say, and I don't want to, to paint all coaches that they're just going to say whatever, but he probably said some very favorable things about you because he wanted you to come to enroll at Mississippi State or whatever the case may be. So guys come in thinking like, oh, coach had all these great things to say and was super nice and blah, blah, blah. And then when it's go time, it's a very different demeanor. That coach, he may still has your back on your side, but now he's actually coaching you up. And that's a very different experience versus being recruited. And some guys are able to handle it and some guys aren't. And it's just different. And I think for some guys it may be a shock, especially when you think of and I kind of call it the AAU culture. Obviously that's basketball, but even the same, I look at it like the IMG academies of the world was it St. John's Bosco and Bishop Gorman, where a lot of really good players come to play together. And I'm sure those coaches there are phenomenal. But what I also think about too is, especially at the high school level, winning is the most important thing, especially at those big, football powerhouse schools. So you may not want to coach a guy as hard as you possibly can and push him to be his absolute best because he may pick up and go take a scholarship from Bishop Gorman and, well, I've got a scholarship waiting for me at IMG Academy. I don't have to deal with this. And not saying all players have that mentality, but it is a little bit different. I know when I was in high school, I'm 35, but when I was in high school, it was the same thing. Guys didn't transfer. You were there because that's the area you lived in, and the coach was there, coached you as hard as he possibly could, and pushed you as hard as he possibly could. And it's just different now. I mean, I think it is different, but for some guys, college might be the first time where you're getting coached extremely hard and getting coached at a very high level, and not everyone takes that well. I mean, I'm sensitive. I don't like being yelled at, so I could speak from my experience, but it's different. It's a different experience, and I'm not sure all of the guys that are enrolling and going to these schools are equipped to handle that.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think that you and I have some groundwork for some decent ideas. I'm not saying we solved anything at all, and I know that there are a lot of other great ideas. And if somebody or a group of people would get together, my concern is like, who's going to take that lead? Who is going to be that person or that group of people to take a lead to say, that they can kind of galvanize other people to take action and have those leadership qualities and that foresight to get together and do what's best for the student athlete while maintaining the integrity of the sport to try to find a balance of what's good for both and proceed with this.
I mean, depending on the pay, I will volunteer myself to.
It's good to know.
I can head up that committee. I mean, I'm relatively unbiased. I'm here to help.
Anybody out there hear that? Desmond is available, just not from 5 to 6 Eastern on Wednesday. That's the only time he can't make it. Other than that, he's going to hit this thing up. If anyone would be smart enough to grab him.
Heck yeah, we gotta fix this thing. It's a bit of a mess right now. It's a bit of a mess.
You've heard my meager ideas. That's about all I can throw at you. I do think there need to be some limitations, but I do believe that we're in a good place with giving the freedom to the athletes to decide where they're going to go to school and play.
Yep.
Because the rest of us have that. And it's the same thing with NIL. Do I believe it needs to be regulated and controlled in certain ways? Because it's gotten it seems like it's become already kind of crazy. But do I believe in that basic right? Yes. We should all be able to go out and earn a buck as long as it's in a legal way, in a way that is accepted by society legally, that you should be able to earn money. For as frivolous as this society is now with social media and all that, it is what it is. Could we have been on here 20 years ago on the internet with people listening to us and so forth? No, but it's a way to make money now, to be on social media in any such capacity, and based on your popularity, your likability, or whatever you offer to people. And I'm sure you scroll through all sorts of videos and things, as I do on Facebook and other platforms, and I think, seriously, like, this person got 5 million views for doing this stupid thing. But hey, if it entertains people and the market determines what's valuable and what's not, shoot, college football in and of itself, if we did not support it as people, if you really think about what it is, it's just a lot of guys that can run and jump and push people around really hard and throw a cow's hide around. We give it value because we find it entertainment.
I mean, if you think about it, it's a 3.5 hour TV show, which that's the crazy thing when you think about it. How many of those are out there? Like, not many. Like, that's a very interesting thing to think about. But it's I think about it. I have 2 young-ish daughters, but TikTok, same thing. Like, some of the creators there are making millions of dollars just doing satire videos, just joking, and it's something. It's something. That's all I'll say. But kudos to them. And these players should be making money. They put a lot into what they do and the preparation and things like that. So they should make some money. We just got to figure out how to get this on a level playing field.
Des, I need to run. I'm going to leave it up to you, and I want to be respectful of your time, so you can hang on here and answer questions or talk about whatever other topic you want to, or if we need to shut down, that's absolutely fine.
Sounds good. Well, it's good chatting with you, Mark.
Absolutely.
Have a good one.
Okay.
So it looks like been seeing a lot with Jim Harbaugh and still potentially leaving, maybe not leaving. I'm still. We talked about this a little bit last week, but I'm still in the thought that he's not leaving. And I've seen some things on essentially the rumors that are coming out are potentially leverage for the new contract, which to me also I don't understand, because there's no need for him to have any leverage for a contract, because, sorry, I'm feeding my pup a treat. You accomplish everything you set out to this year. Like, this isn't the COVID 2 and 4 season where you underperformed, and things were just kind of a mess. I mean, it was a mess for everybody. We understand that, but this was the year where you won what 12 games this year, 12-1, 12-2. You had a great season. You beat Ohio State. You won the Big Ten championship. Beat Iowa in the conference championship. I mean, I'm someone who does not believe that Jim Harbaugh is doing this for leverage. To me, he just doesn't seem like that kind of guy, and I also understand that he's not the one negotiating the contract. He has an agent. It would be my guess. I don't know for sure, but when you're making the type of money that Jim Harbaugh does, you typically do have an agent. So I get that he has an agent who's representing him in the negotiations, but I just don't foresee Jim Harbaugh going through negotiations and trying to create buzz for himself just to make more money at Michigan. I think his contract should be renegotiated. And I think we can all agree on that because he performed well. He did everything that he wanted to do this year. I'm sure they wanted to, win the playoff game and win a national championship. But when you look at the season that they had, it was a phenomenal season. Phenomenal season. There's really no negative you could say about the season. It was a great season. So for me, I don't see why the administration of Michigan would be trying to play hardball with Harbaugh, because that's what he did is what they wanted. So why would you try to punish him and not renegotiate the contract? I mean, we see multiple coaches signing 10-year, near $100 million deals, and for someone who just, like I said, beat Ohio State, won the division, won the conference, and was in the playoff, one of the 4 best teams or most deserving, that's the guy you want to make sure he's comfortable. You want to make sure you have that long-term commitment with Harbaugh. And I could see the flip side. I could see Harbaugh wanting to have that long-term commitment to Michigan as well. Sounds like the Raiders is most of the rumored. Jim Harbaugh is supposedly going there. Listen, it could all be true, and I could be way off base and have no idea what's really going on, because I really don't. I'm guessing with all of this. I'm not dialed in. I'm not at Schembechler Hall. But to me, I find it very difficult to think that Jim Harbaugh did all of this work and also took all of the criticism, because the first couple years, it was like, okay, from the jump, Michigan was winning a lot of games. But once you got to the point where, year 3, year 4, year 5, that you're not beating Ohio State, the margin in those games is getting bigger, and you're also watching your rivals go to Indianapolis and win the conference and win national championships and play in the playoff. Right, he was taking a lot of criticism. There were people that after the 2-4 season last year thought he should have been fired. So you go from taking all of that criticism, the khaki pants and all that stuff, people calling for your job last year, to now this year, you win the conference. You have probably the number 1 pick in Aiden Hutchinson, and I think I saw David Ojabo mocked at like number 13, a top 13 pick in the NFL. And now this is the time that you want to leave and go to the Raiders situation, which the Raiders, I think they have a good core to work with. They got to figure out things with Derek Carr if they're going to extend him long term, but nonetheless, I just find it hard that he went through what he did for the 7-8 seasons to get to this point to leave now. I just find it very difficult. When you look at the future, even the next 2-3 years down the road, you've got J.J. McCarthy, that coveted 5-star quarterback that Jim Harbaugh really hasn't recruited out of high school. Shea Patterson was a 5-star, played at Ole Miss and transferred to Michigan, but Shea Patterson, in the time that he was here and played for Michigan, I don't think showed anything to what JJ has shown in just his first season in limited action. So You got the guy at quarterback. You've got plenty of talent coming back in the backfield. You've got Ronnie Bell coming back on the outside, along with the other guys on the outside. Like, there's just so much to look forward to, and I just find it difficult that he did all of this work, made all of these changes, just to leave and go back to the NFL. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's any way he's leaving. So we'll see what happens. I will see if I can jump into a couple questions here. Ryan Day to the Bears. That's interesting. He said he always hated the state of Ohio and doesn't want to coach against Michigan again. The truth is the rumors. Let's see. If I'm Jim and I see Michigan doesn't care as much as he does, I'm going to Vegas easy. That Rico, I mean that is interesting. I do think Michigan cares. And the reason I say that is I think the administration has done a really good job of giving him the budget that he needs and really just kind of getting out of his way. Like, I think that's the most important thing you can do as an administration is to give me what I ask for, give me what I need, and get out of my way. Now, the NIL thing, that's still kind of up there a little bit. As far as, is Michigan doing all that they can with NIL? I'm not going to say they are doing all they can with NIL, but it's just so... It's similar with the transfer portal. There's just been no guidance on it. And that's the part that I don't like, that I don't love, is there just doesn't seem to be any real guidance on it. So I think Michigan, the administration, has done a good job and done well for Jim Harbaugh, that they have given him what he needs and they have gotten out of the way and let him do that. Rico also said, would you choose Mike Hart or the field as the next head coach? I think our current coach sees that the school is not dedicated to taking the next step. I would probably take the field, and it's not that I think Mike Hart is a really good coach, and I also thought it was crazy that Indiana ended up hiring him as their running backs coach and not Michigan. I thought that was silly, and that was just a missed opportunity. But I would probably want someone with some head coaching experience as far as college, because there's just so much that you have to manage with position coaches, recruiting, get recruiting assignments, and just understanding all of that. There's so much that goes into it, and it's changing so much too with the transfer portal. Now you have to consistently be recruiting the players that you already signed. Like, you have to always be recruiting consistently and constantly, and that for some guys it may be a lot to deal with, and who knows, and it just, like I said, it may be a bit overwhelming for someone who's never been a head coach. Like I said, I think Mike Hart is a phenomenal coach, and you look at, I don't think it was a coincidence that the year that he gets here, your running backs are just as a group probably top 2, top 3 in the country. I don't think that was a mistake. Harbaugh is in a great position. He can go coach in the NFL for more money, no recruiting, more time with the family. That's understandable, and that's very true. From everything I've heard, all of his family, for the most part, is here, and obviously with his dad is older than he is. So you talk about potentially uprooting, moving, which as a coach that's kind of part of your lifestyle, but would you want to leave what's essentially quote unquote home for you? I'm not sure. And I'm sure that's something that comes into play with the, when it comes to your decision and where you go. So it's interesting. We'll see what happens. Let's see. Luke Fickle would take the Michigan job because it's a top job in college football, and he was slighted at Ohio State. I mean, I'm not Luke Fickell. I'm not close to him, so I don't know. I think he did get a bit of a raw deal at Ohio State as the interim coach, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. He may be an Ohio State guy in and out, to where he's just like, I could never wear maize and blue. I don't know him that well. He seems to be doing a great job at Cincinnati, so I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure. Tyndall says, seriously, Harbaugh is a much better NFL coach than he was at the college level. Just my 2 cents. I mean, it's hard to argue with his results, especially those first 3 years at San Francisco. They, 3 straight NFC championships and went to the Super Bowl once. I mean, that's a very difficult thing to do. Very, very difficult thing to do. Ed Rogers, what kind of dog? I have a Brittany Spaniel. She is looking at me right now. Her name is Dylan. But we'll see what happens. Rumors. So the truth says, I literally think college football coaches sleep about 2 hours a day. I would agree with that. It's a very difficult job. I think if there was anything that would be just very, very, very appealing about the NFL, it would be that you're not having to worry about transfer. You're not worrying about recruiting. You're out on the road having to travel to go see those guys, and they travel in style now, and it's a little more comfortable, but it's still, you're still gone from your family, and that can't be an easy thing. And it's just such a long period of time that you have to deal with that. So we'll see what happens. The rumors are going to keep flying because Jim Harbaugh he's going to get a lot of attention to those websites, and it's one of those things where he's a popular guy, and he's a really good coach, and he was phenomenal in the NFL. So it's probably going to continue until or if he signs an extension. So we'll see. But I think that is it for me, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining. I greatly appreciate it. My partner Dre couldn't be here today, but he should be here next week. So thank you all. Greatly appreciate it. Have a great evening, and stay safe. See you guys.